Americans have a love affair with college sports. Amateur athletics is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Every fall, massive stadiums around the nation are jam-packed each Saturday for college football season. And each spring, television airwaves are jam-packed with coverage of the March Madness NCAA basketball tournament. College athletes can become world-famous celebrities before they ever turn pro. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a legend at UCLA playing for John Wooden's Bruins teams. And Barry Sanders' record-breaking career at Oklahoma State made him a legend way before he ever turned pro. Retired athletes love to reminisce about their glory days. Whether it's Michael Jordan's game-winning jump shot in the 1982 NCAA championship game against Georgetown when he played for the North Carolina Tar Heels, or when the great Joe Montana led Notre Dame to the national championship in the Cotton Bowl after fighting hypothermia in the chicken soup game in 1979. However, you never hear Wayne Gretzky telling stories about winning the NCAA championship while playing in the SEC for the University of Alabama. Instead, the Great One played his amateur career for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds in the Ontario Hockey Association while trying to win the Memorial Cup. In football and basketball, the NCAA is the developmental league for both the NBA and the NFL. However, in the NHL, less than 1/3 of hockey players played any college hockey. 20 years ago, it was less than 1/5. Hall of Fame goalie Frankie Brimsick played college hockey in the 1930s. After Brimsick, there were no NHL former college players until the late 1960s when Tony Esposito was a star goalie for the Michigan Tech Huskies. In other words, from the 1940s through the 1960s, there was only one way to play in the NHL. And it wasn't going to college, it was playing junior hockey. Although the age limits have changed throughout the years, junior hockey is the highest level of competitive amateur hockey for players between the ages of 16 and 21. The same way that the NCAA has different divisions, junior hockey has different divisions as well. The highest level of junior hockey is Major Junior and is governed by the Canadian Hockey League. The CHL is currently made up of the Ontario Hockey League, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and the Western Hockey League. Each year, the winners of the three leagues compete in a tournament for the national championships called the Memorial Cup. Just like the NBA and the NFL, since 1963, the NHL has begun an entry-level draft in which eligible players are drafted from the junior hockey leagues. It is an unfortunate fact that most amateur athletes never make it to the pros. However, at least football players and basketball players have college degrees they can fall back on. Hockey players can't really frame a diploma from the University of Junior Hockey. The junior hockey system in the 1950s was much different than it is today. Prior to the 1963 draft, the NHL had a complete monopoly and control over the junior hockey league teams and the players who played for them. This monopoly was the brainchild of Hall of Fame builder Frank Selke, who on July 26, 1946, became the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens after a lengthy and successful run as an executive for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Frank Selke is so respected in hockey that one of the NHL awards for best defensive forwards is named after him. Selke was the genius behind putting together the great Montreal Canadiens dynasty of the 1950s. Selke was able to accomplish this by creating something called the sponsorship system. The National Hockey League began to financially support junior clubs under the jurisdiction of the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association in exchange for the NHL gaining complete control over their operations and exclusive professional playing rights for the players on their sponsored teams until they reached the age of 21 and were no longer eligible to play junior hockey anymore. During this time, the two biggest junior hockey leagues in Canada were the Ontario Hockey Association and the Quebec Junior Hockey League. 5 of the NHL teams sponsored teams in the Ontario Hockey Association. Austin sponsored the Barrie Flyers. Chicago sponsored the Galt Blackhawks. Detroit sponsored the Oshawa Generals. The Rangers sponsored the Guelph Bitmore Mad Hatters, and Toronto sponsored the Toronto Marlboros. Montreal did not have any teams sponsored in the Ontario Hockey Association because they had complete total control of the entire Quebec Junior Hockey League. This was because there was another rule that was in place that gave exclusive rights to all players who played or lived within a 50-mile radius of any NHL city. So anybody who lived within 50 miles of Montreal was automatically owned exclusively by the Montreal Canadiens, even without a contract, until reaching the age of 21. Imagine a scenario in which anybody who plays college football in the SEC is automatically under the exclusive rights and ownership of the Dallas Cowboys. This is the exact type of situation that occurred in hockey back in the 1950s. If somebody wanted to play in the NHL, then they better play for one of those 5 teams sponsored in the Ontario League or play in the Quebec Junior Hockey League. That was the only way that a person could ever play in the NHL. Selke's system also maintained control through a series of notorious option contracts called A, B, and C forms. If a player signed an A form, he'd be bound by that agreement to show up to the club's training camp if they requested him to be there. The contract was for only 1 year, but if the player refused to do what it said, he would be banned from playing all professional and amateur sports until he later conducted a tryout. The NHL club could also allow him to play up to 5 NHL games without having him sign a standard player's contract. If the team decided not to sign the player to a contract, then they'd be released after the 1 year. The B form, on the other hand, was very, very rarely used. Most famously, in the case of the great Jean Beliveau. Under this type of form, the player could demand a contract from the NHL team at any time and would be paid at the rate of the average salary of the league. The B form prevented the player from playing professional for any other team other than the team that he signed the form with. But it did not require him to play professional if he did not want to play professional hockey. The C form was the most used and was the most restrictive and notorious and unfair contract that was imposed on the players. The C form actually included terms of what the salary would be if the player played in the various leagues, including signing bonuses and the different salaries that the player would earn depending on whether he played in the NHL, the AHL, or playing junior hockey. These terms were not negotiable. The players did not have lawyers or agents at this time. They had to play for whatever the NHL team told them they would be playing for. There was also a clause which forced the players to agree that they would play hockey only for the team that they could be designated by the club. In other words, whether or not they actually signed a contract, the team could dictate where that player could play, even as an amateur. And it would allow this player to be traded or moved to any other club, even against the player's will. Although the contract only was for 1 year, the club had exclusive rights to automatically renew it for another year over and over in perpetuity, which meant that it lasted forever. This was the system that was in place when Jim Bartlett began his junior hockey league career. Jimmy Bartlett began his junior hockey league career playing for the Verdun Junior Mapleleafs in the Quebec Junior Hockey League. Because he was only 17 years old, Jimmy was only permitted to play a limited amount of games. He made his debut in 1950 and only played 6 games with very limited ice time. The Verdun Mapleleafs used to be a quality team. In fact, at one time, the great Maurice the Rocket Richard played junior hockey for them. However, by 1950, they had fallen on hard times and were scraping the bottom of the barrel. There were basically 2 tiers of teams in the Quebec Junior Hockey League. The premier teams in the league were full of prospects of the Montreal Canadiens. The cream of the crop was the Montreal Junior Canadiens, coached by Sam Pollock, a future Hall of Fame general manager of the Canadiens dynasties of the 1960s and 70s. They were led by future Hall of Fame left winger Dickie Moore. Laval National had the best player in the league that year. For the MVP, future NHL Hall of Famer Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion, who was experimenting with this new shot called the slap shot, which made him extremely popular. The Quebec Citadels were led by the great Hall of Famer Jean Beliveau, who refused to play for the Montreal Junior Canadiens because it was too far from home, and because of his B contract was allowed to play for Quebec. Three Rivers featured their top prospect on defense, Jean-Guy Talbot. The bottom teams in the league were the Montreal Junior Royals, the Verdun Mapleleafs, and the Valleyfield Braves. The Braves were so bad that they folded at the end of the season. These teams only existed basically to give the opportunity for the top teams to have somebody to play against. Jimmy didn't care. He just wanted to play hockey. The one good thing that the Verdun Mapleleafs had going for them is that they had a high-caliber coach named Sylvio Mantha. Sylvio Mantha was a Hall of Fame defenseman who played 13 seasons for the Montreal Canadiens. He helped lead the Montreal Canadiens to their very first Stanley Cup victory in the NHL while playing with the great Howie Morenz. Sylvia saw something in the young Jimmy Bartlett and took him under his wing. When Jimmy Bartlett played junior hockey, he was a defenseman and not a forward. As a teenager, Jimmy's hockey idol was Wild Bill Ezenicki, who played for the Toronto Maple Leafs and was famous for his ability to drop the gloves at any moment and his vicious, violent, unpredictable play and hard-hitting body checks. Wild Bill Ezenicki later retired and became a golf pro. Although small for an NHL defenseman, Sylvia Mantha still encouraged Jimmy Bartlett to play this style of hockey. The Verdun Mapleleafs were eliminated in the playoffs in the quarterfinals by the Jean Beliveau-led Quebec team that was then eliminated by the Montreal Junior Canadiens, who went on to win the Memorial Cup as the Canadian Junior National Champions. The Verdun Mapleleafs' best player was a guy named Jim Morrison, not related at all to the Lizard King. Morrison and Jimmy Bartlett never got along because Jim Morrison's girlfriend in high school dumped him and then dated Jimmy Bartlett. Morrison was a talented defenseman who was also very smart. He realized that he had no chance of ever making it to the Montreal Canadiens because the team was too loaded with talent at defense already. He knew that as long as he stayed in Verdun, he would never ever make it in the pros. So Morrison packed his bags, moved to Ontario, and hooked up with the Barrie Flyers, which were controlled by the Boston Bruins. It was a really smart move for Morrison. The next year, the Barrie Flyers won the Memorial Cup as national champions, and in 1951, he was called up by the Boston Bruins. Morrison had a successful career mostly for the Maple Leafs in the National Hockey League, where he played for 13 seasons. However, he hit his stride in the American Hockey League during the 1960s, primarily playing for the Quebec Aces and then later the Baltimore Clippers. Although they never liked each other, Bartlett and Morrison were in each other's lives for the next 20 years. Jimmy's second season in junior hockey was also playing for Verdun. However, for whatever reason, the team had changed its name from the Verdun Mapleleafs to the Verdun Lasalle. Junior hockey, senior hockey for those over 21, and municipal hockey for local cities was very popular in the 1940s and 50s in Canada for the same reason that college sports were popular in the United States. In Canada, only 2 cities had Major League Hockey teams, and hockey was yet to be televised, so if you wanted to see it, you had to go see it live. So hockey-crazed fans in Canada packed every small little town, coliseum, and arena throughout the country to support their local teams. The Verdun Lasalle opened their season on October 24th, 1950. Only 8 days later, Jimmy was already suspended by the league for berating the referee in a game between Verdun and the Junior Canadiens. After his suspension, Jimmy scored his very first goal in junior hockey on December 7th, 1950. The goal came in a loss to Three Rivers. Jimmy got the only goal for Verdun late in the third period. Pierre Michon, the president of the Boom Boom Geoffrion-led national team, watched the game and commented about how Jimmy Bartlett, the fiery defenseman, was a real comer in the league. While playing junior hockey, Jimmy and two of the other teammates from the LaSalles also made their debut playing in the Montreal Hockey League for the Canadair Aces, a local municipal team. In Canadair's very first game of the season, Jimmy got into a fight that eventually escalated into a near riot. The game broke the record for the most major penalties ever in the Montreal Hockey League, resulting in the suspension of 8 players. By Christmas, the Verdun Lasalle's record was only 1 win out of 19 games. To make matters worse, their next game was against the Montreal Junior Canadiens, the world's greatest junior hockey league team and the defending champions of the Memorial Cup. The Verdun auditorium was basically empty because the Verdun locals did not want to see another shellacking. However, the LaSalles crushed the defending champions and completely outclassed them with their hard-checking and physical style of play. Verdun was losing 3-2 in the third period. However, Jimmy sparked the team when he went on a one-on-one breakaway that, despite the terrific back-checking from Hall of Famer Dickie Moore, resulted in the tying goal. An energized Verdun team dominated the third period, scored 3 more goals, and upset the national junior champions 6-3. All of the magic had disappeared by Verdun's next game, as they got humiliated by the Nationals 8-1, with the only goal being scored by Jimmy Bartlett. Things improved after the new year when Jimmy scored a goal and 2 assists in a victory against the Montreal Royals on January 3rd. On January 15th, Verdun lost a heartbreaker to Three Rivers 6-5, despite Jimmy's goal. Near the end of the game, Jimmy got into a big fight with the goalie, Bobby Perreault of the Three Rivers Reds. Perreault was the best goalie in the Quebec Hockey League at the time and was later inducted into the American League Hall of Fame. On January 18th, Verdun upset the Nats in the most exciting game of the season. Jimmy scored a goal and assist and the game was tied 5-5 with 30 seconds left to go in regulation. Claude Evans of the Nats got penalized for roughing Jimmy Bartlett, and for once, Bartlett did not retaliate. Verdun quickly scored the winning goal on a power play in overtime. On February 21st, Verdun played the Junior Habs, and the game turned into a wild brawl with only 13 seconds left of the game, in which both benches cleared and even fans were involved in the wild free-for-all that occurred. According to the Montreal Gazette, the LaSalles, who had been gaining support throughout the late part of the schedule as underdogs in the playoff hunt, lost a lot of prestige with their disgraceful display that night and accused them of hitting a new low for rowdy hockey. It was easily the QHL's most violent game of the season. Of course, Jimmy Bartlett was one of the fighters who was also kicked out of the game. Wilf Duranceau, president of the Quebec Amateur Hockey Association, formally announced that a letter of severe reprimand was sent to Jimmy Bartlett for his part in the fight. President Duranceau said that the main cause of the free-for-all was a direct result of inadequate protection for the players. He said that in all future games, the rinks would be asked to make certain that the teams were afforded the fullest protection. When the fight started that night, fans poured out of the stands and took part in the fight. There was only a handful of ushers on hand and no police, so that it didn't take long for the fight to get completely out of control. This formal reprimand did not prevent Jimmy Bartlett from getting a goal, an assist, and a major fight for a Gordie Howe hat trick in his next game against the Montreal Nationals. Despite the atrocious start of the season, the LaSalles were able to turn it around and were able to somehow sneak into the playoffs. On March 9th, 1951, Verdun eliminated the Montreal Nationals, featuring the great Bernie Geoffrion, on a 4-3 comeback victory. According to the Montreal Gazette, Jim Bartlett, Peck's bad boy of the JAHA, emerged as the hero of the piece for the LaSalles. It was Bartlett's goal at the 15-minute mark of the third period that gave Verdun their victory. Unfortunately, 2 days later, Verdun was eliminated by Three Rivers, and Verdun's season was over. Three Rivers lost in the finals to the Quebec Citadels, led by the great Jean Beliveau. At the end of the season, the league gave Beliveau a car as a reward. In the Memorial Cup, Quebec lost to the Memorial Cup winning Barrie Flyers, featuring former Verdun Mapleleaf Jim Morrison. After the season ended, the Verdun Lasalle ceased to exist, and they were replaced by the St Jerome Eagles, where Jimmy would play for the next season. In the off-season, Jimmy went back home to live with his mom and dad and brothers and sisters at their home in Côte d'Ivoire, Saint Paul, slightly north of Verdun. Fred Bartlett had retired from the Navy and now was working as an usher for the Montreal Forum. Jimmy got a job as a counselor for a summer camp for kids. He was also the athletic director for the camp. He would do this every year for many years during the off-season from playing hockey. His dream was to retire from hockey eventually with enough money so that he could set up and buy his own summer camp for kids. Besides a summertime full of sports and fun, Jimmy's favorite part of summer camp was the annual talent show. Each year for the talent show, Jimmy would do his two famous comedy gags. For the first gag, he would come out on stage holding a large rope that he would be backward pulling with all of his might. Nobody in the audience could see what he was pulling. He would just keep going backwards as he was trying to pull whatever object he was pulling onto the stage. Eventually, Jimmy would disappear as he kept going backwards. Eventually, however, the object that he was pulling would appear on the other side of the stage, and it was none other than Jimmy Bartlett himself with a rope tied around him. His second gag would be familiar to anyone who ever saw the 1980s movie Hollywood Nights. Jimmy would come up on stage pretending that he was a one-armed violinist, with the violin tucked under his chin, and after he got done playing, an appendage would emerge from Jimmy's zipper from his pants that would grab the bow as he took a glorious bow. The town of St Jerome is located about 30 miles north of Montreal. Sylvio Mantha was hired to coach the team, and of course he took his feisty little defenseman with him. On October 30th, 1951, the St Jerome Eagles lost to the Montreal Junior Habs, despite the fact that helter-skelter Jim Bartlett came up with a neat performance for the losers by netting both goals. According to the Montreal Gazette, while playing in Quebec against the Citadels, on November 18th, Jimmy Bartlett played a standout game on defense for St. Jerome until he was forcibly led to the visiting team's dressing room after getting kicked out of the game following a fight with Quebec's Rainier McKilla. Bartlett was kicked out of the game because after McKilla was sent to the penalty box following the fight, Bartlett jumped over the boards and went into the penalty box and continued to fight with him. Jimmy was escorted off the ice into the dressing room by about 12 police officers who roughed him up. According to Bartlett, they twisted his arm severely and punched him in the face several times. The next day, the teams played again, but this time in St. Jerome. When four unruly fans jumped onto the ice and started fighting with Quebec Citadel player Bruce Klein, the police jumped in, but according to head coach of the Citadels, Fiery Phil Watson, they were helping the fans instead of the player. Coach Phil Watson informed the league that he would refuse to ever take his team to play against St. Jerome and St. Jerome ever again unless given proper, adequate protection. The St. Jerome president, Paul Amiot, accused Watson of just exaggerating the incident in order to save face after the outrageous conduct by the police who manhandled Bartlett the night before. On the next night, 2 goals by Jimmy was still not enough to defeat the Montreal Nats behind the hat trick of young Henry Richard, the younger brother of Rocket Richard. Henry Richard later got the nickname Pocket Rocket, but at this time, for whatever reason, they were calling him Flash. Despite 2 goals, an assist, and a fight for a Gordie Howe hat trick by Jimmy Bartlett, St. Jerome still lost to 3 Rivers because of Jean-Guy Talbot's third period goal. On December 5th, the Junior Canadians defeated the Eagles. The star of the game was Bartlett's old buddy from high school, Scotty Bowman, who scored his very first goal ever for the Montreal Junior Canadians after being brought up from a Junior B team. According to the Montreal Gazette, At the halfway point of the season, Jim Bartlett, the rough, tough St. Jerome defenseman, holds the dubious honor of league-leading bad man with a total of 137 minutes in penalties for 34 games. Bartlett also rates as the top scoring defenseman in the league with 33 points from 12 goals and 21 assists. On January 13th, 1952, the Eagles defeated Granby with a goal scored by Jimmy. On January 16th, the Eagles traveled back to Quebec City to play against Phil Watson's Citadels. Again, the game turned really ugly. In the final period, with Quebec defenseman Marc Jeannot sitting in the penalty box, Jimmy Bartlett skated by and spit a loogie in his face. This caused Bartlett to get kicked out of the game. Bartlett's teammate Ron Pilon then skated over to the Quebec bench and started taunting coach Phil Watson. Phil Watson responded a la Bartlett and hocked the loogie in Pilon's face. The next day, Pilon, Bartlett, and coach Phil Watson were all suspended by the league. Sylvio Mantha took up for his players by saying that, "Why are they suspended? Spitting is as old as the game of hockey itself." Sylvio Mantha claimed that for his entire career, fans spit at players on the ice and players spit back. This was because there was no plexiglass at the time, and all they had was chicken wire to separate the fans from the players on the ice. After his suspension was over, in the next game, the Jerome Eagles completely outclassed the Montreal Junior Canadiens. According to the Montreal Gazette, Jim Bartlett, who took only one penalty, proved again that he can be one of the top defensemen in the league if he sticks to hockey. Mantha used a rugged Bartlett practically all night, and he broke up play after play in addition to some fancy rushing. On February 3rd, Jimmy Bartlett's goal helped the Eagles win after overcoming a 4-1 deficit against the Montreal Nationals. 1 week later, Jimmy Bartlett scored a hat trick against the Montreal Junior Canadiens in a humiliating defeat for them. Jimmy Bartlett's last game as a St. Jerome Eagle occurred on February 13th, 1952. Three Rivers Reds defeated the St. Jerome Eagles 5-4. Jimmy Bartlett scored all 4 goals for the losing team. 2 days later, it was announced that Jimmy and Fern Lapointe of the St. Jerome Eagles had been released by the team because they didn't make the playoffs. Instead, they wanted them to get more playing time, so they sent the 2 players to the Boston Olympics of the Eastern U.S. League. Boston Olympics, better known by their fans as simply the Picks. By this time, hockey writers were beginning to take notice of Jimmy Bartlett and were comparing him to defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens, Kenny Reardon. Kenny Reardon was later inducted into the NHL Hall of Fame. His brother Terry Reardon later played a major role in Jimmy Bartlett's hockey career. At this time, Jimmy was given the nickname the Battler. Calling Jimmy Bartlett the new Kenny Reardon was quite a compliment in the vicinity of Montreal, or elsewhere for that matter, because Reardon was one of the scrappiest and most efficient defensemen in the NHL. In the 1951-52 season, Jimmy Bartlett shattered the Quebec Junior Hockey League's record for penalty minutes in a season that was set the year before by Jean Talbot. According to the Montreal Gazette, the ironic part of young Bartlett's performance is that when he isn't in the jug, he is one of the speediest and best defensemen in the circuit. After arriving in Boston on February 24th, the goaltender for the Boston Olympics ended up leaving the game with a severe leg injury. They did not have a backup goalie, so Jimmy Bartlett volunteered to finish the game as the goaltender for the Picks that night. On March 25th, Jimmy Bartlett scored the unassisted winning goal on a solo dash to give Boston a 5-4 victory over the New Haven Tomahawks in the opening game of the playoffs. Unfortunately, Jimmy hurt his knee, and that was the end of the season for him. While Jimmy was playing in Boston, the Quebec Junior Hockey League was engaged in their playoffs. On March 7th, 1952, in a game between the Montreal Junior Canadiens and the Three Rivers Reds, tragedy struck. Scotty Bowman of the Junior Habs was on a breakaway toward the opposing goal with star defenseman for the Three Rivers team, Jean Talbot, in pursuit. With his team on the verge of elimination from the playoffs, Talbot swung his stick twice at Bowman in frustration, cracking open his skull. Bowman was rushed to the emergency room with a huge gash in his head. Scotty Bowman lost a piece of his skull that day. A steel plate was inserted into his head. His hockey playing career was over. He was only 18 years old. The fact that Bowman was British and Talbot was French did not go unnoticed by the press or the fans, who wanted to blame the incident on the growing racial tensions that were getting worse and worse in Montreal. Gilles Boisvert was the goalie for Three Rivers, and his face was covered in the blood of Bowman after the attack. Gilles Boisvert told me personally that Talbot was not a dirty player and that the hit and injury was accidental. However, Talbot did lead the league in penalties the year before, so he wasn't exactly the world's cleanest player. However, Scotty Bowman himself forgave Talbot and later even became Talbot's head coach. By the end of the 1951-52 season, the Montreal organization considered Jimmy Bartlett to be one of the organization's top young, promising prospects. He was considered to be a lock for the end-of-season junior all-star team. However, when the all-star team was announced, Jimmy was only listed on the second team, not the first team. Instead, first-team honors went to Jean Talbot, to nobody's surprise. After all, he was considered to be a star and the top defensive prospect in the organization. Jimmy, at 5'9" and playing for the lousy St Jerome teams, was considered to be way too small to be an NHL defenseman. However, a close look at Jimmy's statistics that year shows that he had a remarkable and historic Junior Hockey League season, much better than Talbot's. Not only did Jimmy Bartlett shatter the record for penalty minutes for the league, he also shattered the record for most points scored in a season by a defenseman and also goals scored in a season by a defenseman in the Quebec Junior Hockey League. Jimmy outscored Bruce Klein, who later became American Hockey League Rookie of the Year. Jimmy outscored Claude Provost, who ended up having a very lengthy career for the Montreal Canadiens. Jimmy outscored the Pocket Rocket, Henry Richard, who later won 11 Stanley Cup championships with the Montreal Canadiens. And he did all of this as a defenseman. How good were Jimmy's numbers? 11 years later, another young defenseman played his first year of junior hockey for the Oshawa Generals. His name was Bobby Orr. He scored 29 goals in 1963 compared to Jimmy Bartlett's 25 goals. But Bobby Orr did it in 12 more games. In fact, the statistics are very similar. This is not to suggest that Jimmy Bartlett in any way, shape, or form was close to being Bobby Orr as a hockey player. Nobody was close to being as good as Bobby Orr. However, the numbers don't lie. Unfortunately, Talbot was considered to be the top prospect of the organization, and Bartlett played for the St Jerome Eagles. And nothing was going to change that fact. On April 22nd, Jean-Guy Talbot got a one-year suspension from playing amateur hockey anywhere. Meanwhile, the top amateur player in the world, Jean Beliveau, was refusing to turn professional. Instead, because he had those provisions of the B contract, there was nothing that Montreal could do that could pry him away from the Quebec Senior Hockey League team that he was playing for. It was looking as if the top organization's prospects at both defense and forward were unable to play for the Montreal Canadiens. But general manager Frank Selke had a plan. He assigned Jean-Guy Talbot to the Quebec Aces and had him join Beliveau with the Quebec Senior Hockey League. And then he bought the entire league and turned that league from an amateur league to a professional league. This allowed Talbot to play and made Beliveau a professional, since the contract required Beliveau to play professionally for whatever team the Canadiens decided he could play for. They were now free to call him up to the big leagues. Meanwhile, Jimmy Bartlett's junior hockey career was over. He had graduated from the University of Junior Hockey. As he relaxed to work at the youth camp over the summer, he wondered, where will I play next season?